This is the perfect camera rig, or at the very least, the perfect rig for me. It is a culmination of 10 years worth of tinkering with camera gear and ergonomic lessons learned from filming hundreds of projects. And in this video, I'll show you how to build a rig like this for your own camera, how it can transform in seconds to meet your needs, and why you might need a camera rig like this in the first place. Every single filmmaker has different styles of shooting and different requirements for their day-to-day rig. Over the years, I have found that I like a really compact camera system like you see here, and while I have used several different shoulder mounted systems and built several over the years, I really find that I end up bringing the camera down and kind of in front of me like this. And while camera or sensor stabilization has improved immensely since I started filming 10 years ago, I still find that good old-fashioned way gives me the most natural looking handheld when it comes to a rig like this. Another critical feature for me is speed. I hate having to tweak rigs on the go or use tools to make slight changes on set. With this setup, you can change up the rig in seconds and everything is powered off of a single battery. I also hate how most rigs don't sit firmly or flat on a table or the ground. This camera rig has a really strong stand built into it, so you can set it down like this. Now you have two hands to be able to make changes and adjustments to the rig. It's not flopping around on you, which is just the worst. Finally, I really like my rigs to be able to drop into a case without having to tear everything down. This whole setup slips perfectly into my favorite case, which is the Portabrace cargo case, for those of you who might be curious. While I built this rig for my Sony A7s III, you could use it with most any camera. That said, cameras with a flip out screen work best. As you can see, the display here folds perfectly in line with the rig, so I can still see my settings, and if I need to, I can still flip it out so that I can view it while filming, but if I need to get it out of the way, it's as simple as that. In a second, we'll dive into building this rig from scratch, but I want to quickly go over the other great features of this setup. The monitor and EVF, which we'll talk about, can be attached and removed very quickly using these Nato rails, which are all over the camera rig. There's a top handle which also has a Nato Rail functionality, letting you quickly remove it and change up the setup. There's also a focusing system which allows me to, with one finger, change the focus while also holding onto the camera grip, and of course I can remove it completely if I'm using autofocus lenses, or just replace it with a really nice wooden handle. And of course, if I need to, I can completely remove the camera from the entire setup. Here are just a few configuration options, all of which can be set up in seconds thanks to the quick release plates and Nato rails on this rig. I did a quick calculation and there are over 20 different setups that you can build using the different modules that we'll be talking about a little bit later. Now let's start building this rig from scratch. Links to everything will be in the description, and we'll begin with what I call the core rig. This is the heart of the camera setup and it allows us to quickly add accessories. The first thing I did was add a cage to the camera. This gives us several mounting options for other gear. For my A7S, I went with the Tilta half cage for the A7s III as I really wanted to keep this rig as compact as possible. An optional mod would be removing the A7S's port covers. I hate dealing with those darn flaps, so I just removed them following a tutorial I found online, which I'll include in the description. Next, we need this 15mm camera base plate and a pair of 6-inch 15mm rods. Add the rods to the base plate so it looks like this. Next, I took this SmallRig Arca Swiss quick release, added the plate to my A7s III, and bolted the clamp to the camera base plate. You can use any quick release plate, but I exclusively use the Arca Swiss standard, and this particular plate has a really nice side latch, making camera removal a breeze. Next, we can add the incredible Kessler quick stand. This big chunk of aluminum does two things for us. First is actually an Arca Swiss quick release plate, allowing us to mount the entire rig to tripods or other support gear, but it also has 4 little rubber feet pads that keep our rig from tipping over or scratching up surfaces. Now let's work on the battery mount. For this rig, I went with the new Nitze mini V-mount plate. This thing has a D-tap and a barrel jack on both sides of the unit and has a microscopic footprint compared to standard battery plates. To mount this to the rig, I used a cheese plate connected to a 15mm Railblock. From there, I was able to bolt the battery plate onto that setup and add it to the rest of the rig. For batteries, you could use standard sizes, but to keep things compact, I'm using these awesome little Cane TV mini batteries. At $145 each, you really can't beat these little things. They give you an additional 2 D-tap jacks and even a USB jack on the top. For additional stability when filming, I added a 15mm Rosette adapter and this sweet wooden handle to the left side of the rig's 15mm rods. This makes holding the camera much more comfortable and is perfect in those scenarios where you'll be using video autofocus. If you need to focus manually, you can quickly remove the handle and throw it in a bag. Now we can add our camera to the core rig, connect a D-tap dummy battery to the camera and the battery plate, tuck the excess cables between the camera and the battery plate, and with that, our core rig is complete. Next, we will work on 3 accessory modules, which include a top handle, a monitor or EVF, and a wireless focus control module. Let's start with the top handle. There are tons of top handles out there, but I opted for this tiny Nato top handle. To install it, simply add a Nato rail to the top of the camera cage and slide the handle on. These Nato rails have little locking pins, so the handle won't accidentally slide off of the camera. The handle I'm using isn't the cheapest at around $75, but I love how compact it is. You could of course swap it out for something much cheaper like this $35 version. To complete the handle setup, I'm going to add another Nato rail to the front of the handle. This will allow us to easily add and remove other accessories like a monitor, which we'll talk about next. The monitoring module consists of either an HDMI display or an EVF. For the display, I went with the Atomos Shinobi, as it is only $300 and weighs almost nothing. To attach this 5-inch monitor to the camera, you can add a Nato friction monitor mount. These are great as you can adjust the angle of the monitor with one hand. And since it has a Nato clamp, removing the monitor takes seconds. To power the monitor, we need a battery adapter as the Shinobi doesn't have a power input. Luckily, Atomos sells this nifty battery Eliminator, which works great with the angled male-to-male DC cable I bought on Amazon. The Shinobi monitor accepts any voltage between 6.2 volts and 16.8 volts. Our V-mount battery plate supplies 14.8 volts, which is perfect for the monitor. If you end up going with a 12-volt monitor, make sure you get a power cable that steps down the voltage. Finally, I added one of my favorite HDMI angled cables to the setup, and with that, we have a monitor that can quickly be removed from our top handle, or we can replace the top handle with just the monitor for an even more compact setup. While the Shinobi is nice and bright, I often find myself wanting an EVF on my rigs. Viewfinders give you another point of contact while also giving your eye a miniature theater to compose your shots. Portkeys recently released this LEYE EVF, and at $400, this is easily the best and most affordable option for setups like this. And fortunately for us, this EVF has a similar voltage range as our monitor, so we can simply add another monitor mount to the EVF and swap between the Shinobi and this EVF without changing our cables. This EVF has a Nato rail built onto one side, so for even more flexibility, I added a dual Nato clamp magic arm, which makes finding the perfect EVF angle very easy. Unfortunately, this particular magic arm with the dual Nato clamps isn't really available online, so you could purchase 2 of these Nato arms and put them together to get the same thing. Lastly, for manual focus lenses, which I use a ton, I built this focus module. This allows me to change my focus from the side handle mounted to the left of the rig. And yeah, I know I could just do this and manually change the focus of my lens, but this is so much more secure, and whenever you're doing this number, you're not going to keep your rig as stable. To build this module, I stole the motor, 15mm rod, and USB to USB cable from my Tilta Nucleus Nano kit. Attach the motor and 15mm rod to the side of my camera using this 15mm mount, which is super compact and I absolutely love, and install this Tilta focus side handle to the Rosette adapter we added to the rig earlier. Using that USB to USB cable, you can connect the motor to the handle and bam, you have a super nice handle that focuses your lens with one finger, all without loosening your grip on the rig. The only downside to this setup is that the focus handle needs a Sony MPF 550 battery for power. If you're good with a Dremel and soldering iron, however, you can hack a 550 dummy battery with a step-down converter to work and power the handle from the V-mount plate, which is what I did. And with that, the rig is complete. Now I can turn everything on and have manual focus at the tip of my index finger. If I'm using autofocus lenses, I can ditch the focus module. I could also throw that wooden handle on there. And if I want an EVF instead of a monitor, I can swap them out and use the same cables. And finally, for incognito mode, I can simply remove the entire camera from the rig for stealth filming or stills capture. So how much does this entire thing cost, and is it worth it? Well, for every piece of gear that we've mentioned in this video, you're looking at just under $2,000 to put it all together and have other accessories like the EVF. That includes the battery, cage, focus modules, just absolutely everything. Remove the EVF and you're down to $1,550. And if you remove the manual focus gear, you're looking at $1,100. You can also swap out the Atomos monitor for a cheaper 7-inch display, and now you're down to $900. From there, you can lower the price even more if you want to switch out this expensive top handle for something a little more affordable. And then there's other bits and pieces you could remove, change things out like the quick release plate and so on. So is it worth it? I think absolutely. To have something I can just pull out of a bag when I need to film and I'm good to go. I can do manual focus or autofocus, change up the entire rig. And my favorite feature is that when I upgrade from the A7s III to the A7s IV, 5, 6, whatever other cameras I'm going to use, I can simply pull it out, take a new camera with a cage, drop it in, and keep filming for years to come. So hopefully this video gave you a couple ideas when it comes to rigging up your camera. I'd love to hear how you would modify this setup for your use. Subscribe to the channel for more videos about making videos. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you in the next video.